through August. And that brings us to the third phase of the project, the post-removal monitoring, and that would go on for up to a year, most likely. So as I mentioned, the overall cost is about $500,000. This is a rough estimate that I put together along with a NOAA employee, Bjorn, who we've worked very closely with. The meat of the project comes from the removal itself, about $350,000. The next biggest part is the post-removal monitoring, which could be done almost entirely, if not entirely, by volunteers, whether that be academic, citizen scientists who are interested. That's about $50,000 that we could put forth as part of the matching for the grant. Construction oversight is potentially something that the City of Auburn, through the engineering department, could also put forth. That would be staff time. And any administrative costs we would like to keep lower than 10% of the overall budget, but that would all be covered by the City of Auburn as well, further contributing to our match. So I think it would be about $400,000 requested in the grant for federal money, with $100,000 primarily in the form of services and staff time contributed by the City of Auburn. Again, this is all rough estimates. If we were to be selected for a full proposal submittal, that's when all the fine-tuning and getting quotes would occur. So the pre-proposals are due January 14th, but that is a little under the question right now with the government shutdown. I did reach out to the grant representative with NOAA, but they are under furlough and no details were provided on when the process would start back up. My recommendation would be to still submit the pre-proposal by the date of January 14th. My guess is that they will just postpone the process and have another submittal date for the pre-proposal. So we did last year get a letter of confirmation from the dam owner, Martindale, that they would donate the parcel to the City of Auburn, which would also contribute for a match. Given that that opportunity fell through, I would want to confirm with the owner that they would still be on board with that moving forward. That's something that I could coordinate as well. So overall, I think it's a great opportunity to have this problem taken care of with relatively little coming from the city, as little as possible, but still overall going to serve everyone in terms of recreation, safety, and restoring fish passage, not just here in the City of Auburn, but it could potentially have much bigger impacts and benefits for the entire Little Androscoggin watershed. So with that, I will take questions.
Mrs. State, thank you very much. Just a procedural question. What do you need from the council in the form, if anything, in the form of a resolution, order, support for your January 14th deadline?
I would recommend a letter of support is what was provided last year. So I would need that. And then also, Mr. Crichton last year signed the form that we needed for the pre-proposal.
Very good then. So at this point, you don't need a council resolution of support or, okay. Maybe in the future, but not for the January 14th.
Correct.
Mr. Crichton, the financial, and Mrs. Tate, you talked about a financial contribution in order to strengthen the merits of the proposal. Is anything with regards to dollar amounts needed for your January 14th interest date? Firm dollars, or is that going to be more on the April date for the actual proposal?
I don't need any formal commitment right now, but yeah, any kind of, cash donation or cash contribution that we could have would be in support of our project. I do need rough figures based on what we're requesting from the federal government and what the local contribution will be in the pre-proposal, but that does get more finely tuned for the full proposal, which right now is set to be submitted in mid-April, but that might change again with the shutdown.
Ms. Fournier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we require a local commitment financially in order for you to be able to move forward?
No.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Councilor Walker.
Can you tell me what good this is going to do for the dam that's behind the Baccarat with the fish and stuff? If we open that one up there, what happens when we get to the Baccarat Dam?
Sure. So right now the dam pretty much all of the dams within Auburn on the Little Androscoggin are run-of-river dams, meaning they don't generate a significant impoundment of water. They pretty much let the river flow naturally through them. And that being said, the Littlefield Dam is already breached, so there is water flowing through, so it won't really have too much of an impact on downstream infrastructure. But it's right now a risk if there were to be a big storm event. There is remaining, concrete infrastructure that could further deteriorate and wash out in a big storm or just over time. So that's more of the concern rather than any release of water that's being impounded. It's not really a big factor.
Councilor Young.
The property that you talk about, Martindale giving the city, is that the dam itself? Or is it a land on shore, and is that accessible?
It's the dam itself, which is adjacent to a separate parcel that's owned by Martindale. When I was speaking with Bjorn, he said that the most accessible way to get to the dam for removal would be through a CMP right-of-way. We tried to contact CMP last year in the beginning stages, but didn't really get a hold of them. So it's the dam itself is the property that they would be looking to donate to Auburn, and then access would be from Littlefield Road through a CMP right-of-way.
So there would be a boat launch possibility? Is that what you're talking about?
It's an opportunity for sure. I'm not 100% sure whether that would be proposed immediately in this project. Maybe potential for recreational access. It's definitely something that we could discuss in the stage if we were selected for a full proposal. I think that'd be a great, recreational opportunity there. But it's something that would probably have to be discussed in more detail if we were selected for a full proposal.
My understanding, if the dam is removed, then the property is removed. But if there's some land on shore, then that's another issue altogether. I'm just trying to think what is Martindale going to give us? If they give us the dam or we remove the dam, then there won't be any property there to be held.
Right. My understanding is that the dam has its own parcel, so I'm not sure exactly how that would be handled if the dam's removed, if the parcel is dissolved, or if it's a parcel with nothing on it. I'm not exactly sure.
Not holding back any water right now, is it?
It's not really holding back any water in terms of impoundment. The water is basically being pinched through where it breached previously. So you'd see the water flow throughout the entire corridor of the river, but it's not necessarily impounding any. It's just forcing it through a smaller opening right now.
Thank you.
And I would also, if we could, potentially either Mrs. Tate or Sue, I believe the previous meeting we had on the initial grant was back in April of 2018, March, April. Does that sound familiar?
I believe it was here in late February or early March of last year.
Along with your proposal, if memory serves me correctly, there's a lot of maps, data points, specifics on the parcels from Martindale. If we could probably resurrect that old agenda at some point and just circulate it out to the council, I think that would be helpful going forward.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Titus.
There's no cash match required, but we need to commit. Now, I know we had a little bit of a debate last year because we didn't get a commitment or an idea of what that in-kind match was going to be. Are we going to have that? Have you had any conversations with anybody in staff that there's something going to happen there?
Back in, I believe, May it was, Bjorn Lake of Vanoa and I met with Mr. Crichton, and we discussed potential sources for that in-kind match, again, being primarily staff time and services. So I did create a preliminary estimate. Again, this would need fine-tuning if selected for a full proposal. The bid preparation and permit preparation would be that administrative service that I talked about. We wouldn't want it to be any greater than 10% of the overall grant, so it could range anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 in services. The construction oversight could be provided by the engineering department, and we estimated that to be about $15,000 in services. The parcel donation would be whatever the parcel is valued at currently, and then the post-monitoring effort would be about at least $50,000, all done by volunteers, whether that be college students, high school students, just interested citizens.
That doesn't look like we're talking about a cash match.
Again, I think what earlier Mr. Tate said is, this is an open proposal. It's going to be highly competitive. The strength of the proposal itself is going to be based upon the municipal support that's provided.
Correct.
It's one of those, it's almost like a sealed bid, you know, so you don't want to put in too much, you don't want to put in too little, you got to make sure you know the scenery and so forth. I think Councilor Lasagna probably has a lot of experience with grant writing on this stuff, but yeah, there could be some financial dollar amounts to strengthen the actual merits.
Well, and the point is too, we won't have to vote on doing it until we win the grant. We can give the go-ahead to come up with a proposal, and then once the proposal is accepted, then we all have to have a resolve or whatever to do it, to spend their money or whatever, right?
Correct. Councilor Zahn, you had a question?
Ms. Tate, a couple of things. Is there any thought about MOUs with either Martindale or CMP, just so that we're guaranteed to have access?
So we did, like I said, get that letter of commitment from Martindale initially, and I think we were looking at formalizing that if we were selected for a full proposal, but that never moved forward. So I imagine something like that would need to be formalized with at least Martindale, and then we would need some kind of agreement with CMP to allow access from their right-of-way, because we would be having, you know, a temporary roadway through there so that we could get heavy machinery out to the dam, dump trucks, you know, hauling out material. So there would need to be some kind of formalized agreement with both of them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other questions for Ms. Tate at this point? Councilor Walker?
I just, the last time you were here, I think I asked the same question there. You think that the dam could cause more problems if it deteriorates worse, goes down the river or whatever. Why would we want to think about taking on this burden when we have a private owner that owns this? If he doesn't want to do any more than give you something that's no good, that could cause problems, why wouldn't you ask for some kind of money up front from this gentleman? I think you're taking on, and so is the city, a burden here that belongs to him. And why wouldn't we get a share of his responsibility in cash to help pay for this?
I definitely understand that perspective. It seems like a lot to take on for the city. Ultimately, there's no regulatory standpoint of why Martindale should have to remove this dam, but at the end of the day, it's Auburn citizens, Auburn businesses that lie downstream, and if something were to happen, it would be those people and those businesses, that property, you know, at jeopardy for potential damage, and it would be, you know, the city of Auburn responding to that, you know, potential emergency, you know, disaster situation. So at the end of the day, there's nothing forcing Martindale to remove it right now, but I believe that it would be in the best interest to remove it now under controlled circumstances than to leave it up to Mother Nature potentially to take this thing down, whether that be in one occurrence, one storm, or over time. And it would have to be a proactive standpoint, I believe. Like I said, there's nothing forcing the current owner to remove it, so it would have to be proactive from the City of Auburn's standpoint. And if we can get the majority of the project funded, I think that'd probably be the best case scenario for us.
Ms. Tate, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. And please let us know if there's anything else you need, and I'm sure through the city manager, and we'll be there for you. Okay,
great, thank you.
The initial steps here. Next. Mr. Rick Whiting of the Auburn Housing Authority is here to talk about two pieces of property, 65 Pleasant Street and 154 Court Street, both of which were recently purchased by ARDC. Mr. Whiting, Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us today.
Good evening. Happy New Year, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, and members of the council. I'd like to just go back 5 years when Auburn Housing bought the 62 Spring Street property with the intention to develop it as a mixed-use building. And it was an essential part of the formula that we talked about extensively with Mayor Labonte at the time, that it have not only affordable housing, but market rate housing and commercial. Well, we're not primarily in the commercial business. We're primarily in the housing business. So it's difficult to do, but it makes sense. In that location, it absolutely makes sense to have that type of mixed use. And we did successfully get the application through Maine Housing after years and years of paying taxes on an empty lot, about $10,000 a year. The issue we have related to the properties that abut us that we purchased, Auburn Residential Development Corp. Purchased recently, relates to the commercial use at 62 Spring Street. We're caught between a rock and a hard place with Maine Housing, which cares about housing and doesn't care about anything else. It's very difficult. When Roadblock was developed back years ago, Roland Miller, representing the city, and Chip Morrison, who was city manager at the time, had a heck of a time dealing with HUD because of those commercial bays on the first floor. Never the twain shall meet. When you're doing housing, housing is housing, and commercial must be segregated. There can't be any inter or commingling of funds, that sort of thing. So Maine Housing even takes that approach with parking. So we have this parking lot, which we feel is more than adequate to meet the needs of the tenants at, residential tenants at 62 Spring. But Maine Housing absolutely prohibits the use of any of the spaces for commercial, even if they're vacant, which is ridiculous. But that's a position they've taken. We signed legal documents that put us in that position. Now we have this fire at the corner of Pleasant and Court, which demolished the property. The property was not really restorable. The property owner wanted to sell it. We thought, okay, here's a good location for parking. It's a very small lot. It'd be difficult to develop by itself for any substantial use. Maybe in the future it could be, depending on the density of development in the area and the availability of parking. And then we found the other property was available, so we purchased both properties. Haven't made a decision in terms of the 2-unit that's adjacent to the engine house. It's not in great condition. I'm not sure it has tremendous architectural pizzazz, shall we say. It is an older building, so I'm not sure if it would qualify for historic credits. That would be one way to save it. I think the engine house certainly would qualify because it's on the National Register. But in any event, we think that by having parking available at that site, that enhances our ability to lease the commercial spaces on Spring Street. It's just a short walk to the storefronts that are in the 62 Spring Street location. And that's been part of the inquiry process from potential commercial tenants. They all want to know the same thing, you know, where do we park? And I pull out my sheet with the tremendous inventory of on-street parking, and your average business owner or a business employee doesn't want to go and move their car every 2 hours. They want something a little more secure than that. But interestingly, I mean, on that block, if you count Court Street, Pleasant Street, Drummond Street, and Spring Street, there are 44 on-street parking spaces. And I may be off a couple, because Pleasant Street, they're not lined spaces, but I might actually be short. It could be 46. And then there's the Pleasant Street lot, which the city developed after, I think there was a fire in the market. It used to be a Pleasant Street market over there. And so that created a nice little pocket parking area for, mostly for probably winter relief parking. And I've inventoried that, and driving by, I noticed that it's rarely fully occupied. It's typically 6 or 8 cars out of maybe 20 or so. I don't have the exact count, but our intention is not to do housing with this site, the Pleasant Street and the Court Street properties that we just purchased. The intention would be to, you know, use them for parking, and then as time develops, we think that they could have a higher and better use than parking. And certainly, right across the street, there's a green strip of land which the city and the library lost the opportunity to buy several years ago, which would have made a great development opportunity with a combination of a pretty intensive, high tax value commercial and parking, possibly even like the Da Vinci's that has that small parking lot with basically 2 levels, fairly tiny, dimensions, but yet holds a lot of cars. And I still see that as a potential for sort of uptown Auburn. And when I was chairman of the Comprehensive Plan Committee several years ago now, one of our hopes for Court Street was to see more intensive development. So I understand the council's concern about vacant lots with parking, but I do see that as a short-term thing. And we think that once we get 62 Spring Street occupied, and because of its location, really great central walkable downtown location, that we're going to find that there won't be as many cars as a lot of people, including Maine Housing, seem to think we will need, parking spaces for. So, and we have Uber now. I saw an Uber car the other day, and I think Bates had zip cars at one time that college students could rent on a pro rata share basis. So things are changing, and over time, I think parking needs may change, and these can be, nice development. They can be a nice development opportunity, potentially mixed use and maybe market rate condos, something like that. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Whiting, thank you very much for just the overall update. This council hasn't had an update on this project. Obviously, it was approved by the previous council, so yeah. Thank you for that. And I did request that you speak tonight, and I'll just say why. Mm-hmm. We have heard the story about, kind of land banking and parking, and there'll be, with time, a better use. Mm-hmm. I have never seen in my history with Auburn a time where something is reverted out of parking into that next best use. It's a concern. But to take it at face value, we've heard from the owners of the engine house, we've heard from people that run businesses in the engine house, the library, and in the neighborhood, that they want to have a more walkable community. Mm-hmm. Part of that is to have more downtown storefronts. I'm very encouraged about what you're doing with Spring Street. I think that's going to help. It's definitely a piece of the puzzle. The puzzle is coming together right now, so I'd like to give you an ask if I could. Mm-hmm. We have a strategic planning process that's underway. We're also relooking at a comprehensive plan. That process needs to happen over the next year or so. All that together, I'd like to not do anything with regards to demolition of that property at this point. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to ask AHA or Auburn Housing Residential Corp. I think I got too many acronyms floating around the city. Yeah. And I agree with you. I don't think the aesthetic value of the building is anything that would, make the cover of National Historic Registry monthly. But the walkability, the ability for that engine house not to be an island in a sea of parking, and to encourage our growth of our downtown from Main Street all the way up to Spring Street will help the entire neighborhood. So it would be my personal thought, and probably representing a lot of people I've spoken with, that we not make any decisions with regards to demolition of that property until we can finalize our plans, our strategic plan, as well as our new comprehensive plan, and maybe even look at other options to solve, which I think I heard you say too, everybody thinks they need a parking spot everywhere. It's not actual, it's not the reality of it. We're addicted to parking, and we probably shouldn't, especially as we move forward. But I'd like to have that time. And not be, pressed up against the wall, so to speak. Sure,
and there's opportunities. Just as I was sitting here, I was thinking the Pleasant Street lot that's owned by the city is not that heavily used. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure when there's a snowstorm, the residents absolutely use every space, and they love having that, comfort of knowing they can park there. However, that could be an opportunity there, where there could be leased spaces, where the city could actually generate some income. They have revenue streams for Great Falls Plaza and other leased parking spaces. So if there was a need, and maybe there were 3 or 4 or 5 business owners, employees that wanted to lease spaces, the city could lease a few there, which would then open up the property that we have on the other end of the block. And I mean, I just drove down through Washington Avenue in Portland maybe a month ago to see the new shipping container store. It's this little tiny lot in the sort of the in-town section of Washington Avenue, and there's a couple of businesses in this little shipping container building. It's very neat, and it's an urban infill lot that's probably too tiny to do anything else with, and yet they managed to achieve that little goal of redeveloping a small lot in downtown Portland. So there's a lot of potential, opportunities, and that might be the type of thing that you could do. But our concern, I think the board's concern, I told them about the parcels that were available across the street and how they were lost.
I agree with you.
Because
that was a travesty.
There were entities, public entities, that take a long time to make a decision. And we looked at these properties that were for sale for quite a long time. Nobody was buying, and we say, well, we can do something with these. Let's take them on, and it will have the benefit of, helping market the commercial space at 62 Spring. And, it's not cast in stone for long-term use because, you said, I mean, parking lots generally don't change, but they can. I mean, if we'd had a hotel built in downtown Auburn, a second hotel, there would have been a parking garage. So you would have had a building that was on parking. So it can happen. It just, you need a sort of a
Spark?
A spark and pretty dense development to support that kind of infrastructure, because it's not cheap.
Yeah, agreed. Councilor Fournier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you coming before us tonight, telling us what, your plans are. I wanted to give you some idea of what I have been hearing with my discussions with the young entrepreneurs who are in the engine house, and their desire. Right now, that engine house there are many suites in there, and they're all filled, and they're all working very well together. And their desire is to expand on that concept because it's all in the same vicinity, so that they can. We all know the heart of the downtown, success of downtown are small businesses. Sure. And that's what they're looking for, is the same model that they're in right now. And my vision was that that building would have been perfect or that section is perfect for that kind of thing. I'm not looking for more low-income housing at all right now. We've got a lot of low-income housing.
We're in the business, and we recognized, the city was very proactive. I mean, there's a nice development that's going on Minot Avenue, and then you've got the Hampshire Street one that will happen soon, and then we're in progress. So
we really need market value now. And the other thing is that, of course, with parking, if we take that corner lot and it all becomes parking, I agree with the mayor. Will we ever revisit it again and indeed turn it into something different? I think once it's there, the paving's been done, the work's been done, people will be used to parking there. Will we ever go back to changing our minds as to what will happen there? Another thing I would like to see is that with previously mentioned discussion about our strategic plan and our long-term plan, we really need to work together on where we're headed. Where are we going? What do we want for the city? What do we want for the downtown? I think in my mind, I'm pretty sure I know what I'd like to see for the downtown. It's like it used to be when I first came here, many, many years ago in the 60s. All of that got destroyed with urban renewal. And I was very unhappy at that time with what was going on. I couldn't believe it was actually happening before my very eyes. I think what it ended up doing was changing the fabric of our small city, our downtown. The young people want a downtown. They want to walk to places. They don't really care to have a car, many of them. They want to be able to walk to where they're going to hang out at night, have dinner, do business, all within the same small microcosm. And we're working toward that with the strategic plan. That is the downtown vision, and we need to bring it back to its former self. And I would like to see that be a vision for us, is what can we do that will enhance that and be in keeping with the architectural elements that are there, kind of work with it a little bit, try to blend it as much as possible. So, that's kind of where we're headed. And I think there are so many things going on at this point, but we all have to remember we all headed in the right direction and doing what's best for us, our city. So those are my thoughts. Thank you very much, Mr. Wayne.
Sure.
Any other questions? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you for coming forward tonight to talk about your project. And Auburn Housing is made up of a private and a nonprofit group, right?
We have several entities. The tax credit entities are standalone. They're for-profit. I did a little research because I don't think people understand the kind of taxes that Auburn Housing and its affiliates pay. We would be, if they were one entity, we would be one of the largest. We'd probably be in the top 10. It's $208,000 a year between the Roque Block, Webster, Vincent Square, public housing payment, voluntary payment in lieu of taxes, as well as Esplanade and Bark are voluntary payment in lieu of taxes. So it's a substantial, contribution, because we understand we have, the city has expenses, particularly police and fire for coverage of elderly buildings. Having a high rise, you need a truck with a tall ladder and a lot of, fire persons. So, we try to be a good, responsible corporate citizen within the city. But ARDC is a nonprofit affiliate, but if we establish parking there, it would be a for-profit use, which would then require the payment of taxes. Now, payment of taxes on a parking lot probably aren't that great. It certainly wouldn't be a moneymaker, but it would serve a need in the area. But we were, in terms of the building, the 154 Court Street building, we haven't made any decisions. The board, the ARDC board, doesn't meet that frequently. I've got some members of the board here tonight listening. We'll continue to talk about it. We can have it assessed. I have considered, having a historic consultant assess it. Typically, you need architectural character, and it helps if there's some important historic figure, like the Edward Little House, right, or the Holman Day House is not only architecturally beautiful, but it was owned by a famous author. And so it was easily placed on the National Register. 154 Court, I'm not sure.
There's
Nesty Spiro's ancestor owned it at one time. I know Nesty, he's a good guy, but I don't know if that constitutes high historic value. It might.
Historically, there's been discussion as recently as 2014 about Auburn's historic downtown zone. I might get the nomenclature a little off on that too. No formal action I think was ever taken, nor do I think the parameters of that designated historical district encompass this property that we're speaking of. I think it ends at Pleasant Street. It doesn't continue to Spring. But again, I appreciate these conversations, and I'd love to continue having these conversations with the city and your board, because we do have to look at a historic downtown. It's a very, very apparent now, and maybe as we were talking about the sesquicentennial and our anniversary and our history and our honor, and how do we preserve and really promote that history, we're hypersensitive to it, and I think there's also an opportunity here too.
One last thought on that, if I may. Lewiston has a historic preservation commission, and we have a staff person that just joined the commission, and they just heard a presentation on a church-affiliated property that's being renovated near St. Patrick's Church. It's related to the Center for Wisdom's Women, and Tom Platz is doing the design, and very nice, and we've considered that. The city of Auburn has considered that, and that could be something that it could look at. It's a way of looking at historic buildings, helping them get listed on the National Register, and it also provides for a delay process. For example, United Baptist Church in Lewiston had to go through the commission before it got torn down. They eventually tore it down because the cost to rehab it was far greater than what the resources could be raised at that time to save it. I think now, if that building was still there, they could save it now. But at that time, several years ago, it couldn't be saved. So,
Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I support having a walkable downtown, but I also have heard from constituents, as more and more people that are physically challenged are out there, they need to find parking places in like one hub so that they can park and go. They can't go distance, you know, great distances, but they could get around. So I really appreciate Mr. Whiting's turning that into parking, because that would help give more people with a physical challenge a place to park and not have to go great distances. I'm hearing a lot from constituents that are embraced by our strategic plan and things, but they also are worried about the parking in the area. So I think we can have the best of both worlds.
So
with
do you want to tear it down?
No, what I'm saying is we can have the best of both worlds. We could possibly figure somebody to go into that building and still keep part of the other part for parking, okay, is what I'm getting at. That way we could win-win. Every business, like, I've been hearing from people from the engine house. They're worried about where their staff is, once that building grows even bigger as business increases, where they're going to park. And I know the Mr. Whiting's group has offered to do so much parking, but there's only so much they can be following HUD's rules and things. So this extra parking fits the bill to help the engine house and any other businesses, even if we get a vendor to buy the building, or if Auburn Housing's, one of their side groups, converts that building into, like they said, loft apartments or condo units and things. So
yeah, I think that's what, yeah, we're talking about. Okay, so
yes.
Thank you, Councilor Gay. Is there any other comments? If not, we're like to excuse Mr. Whiting.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Whiting, thank you very much for your time.
Certainly.
Thank you for coming.
Next, legislative issue discussion with City Manager Peter Creighton. Oh, gee gosh, I
yes.
almost ignored, don't hold that against me. Next, Senior Center Project with Mr. Michael Chamings presenting. I'm sorry, Mr. Chamings.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Michael Chamings. I'm the Director of Economic Community Development, and this is Al Botter, and he is the rehab coordinator for the CDBG program. As you know, several years ago, the Senior Center started planning to expand, and they've done quite a bit of work on it. The project, the CDBG program, has had a record year of funds from program income coming in, people paying back their loan monies, which is 50% higher than normal, than we budgeted. And also, besides that, we've had an underperforming fund, the STAR account, which is now being utilized more. And we've also had a couple of projects that haven't happened this year, such as the Chestnut Street closure. We're allowed to carry 1.5% of our budget forward. Over that amount, we have to spend by a certain time. So currently, the senior project, because it had quite a bit of planning put into place and an active committee, and it involves seniors, our department would like to take over that project. We feel we have up to $300,000 of federal funds to do that project, and that we could come in under that number. So we're looking at amending both the consolidated plan and the annual plan. We laid out a tentative schedule to do that. While we do that, we also would like to look at amending our STAR program to make that a little user-friendly, because it is being utilized, but there's some projects that we feel would have went forward if they were just, if it had some different standards put into place. So you also have a draft a memo from Hal Botter on the proposed renovations, and a draft drawing from currently what's there in the planned expansion. So we wanted to bring this forward to the board to get our blessings to move forward. We're very time constrained on this, but we want to utilize these monies so we don't risk the federal monies going back into the federal pool. We think the senior center is a good project, and it's gained a lot of ground in the last year.
Mr. Jennings, thank you very much. First of all, just a couple things for the council. There's a bigger conversation to be had about the entire pool of money. I'd rather not use this time because it's limited to go into the details on that. We will have time in the schedule on the workshop on the 14th to go into greater details on this money, utilization, proper utilization, and so forth. Second, I'd like to thank Councilor Walker, Councilor Gary. So they're co-chairmanships of the Mayor's Subcommittee, or excuse me, Ad Hoc Committee on Aging Issues. Really brought to light, I think, a lot of the needs for our aging population. And sometimes it might have seemed like you're yelling against a wall with nobody listening. The need for a better space for our seniors to hold events and so forth, and really build connections within our aging population. So I'd like to thank you for keeping that right on the forefront of people's minds. I'd like to also thank staff for hearing this and really looking at opportunities and thinking outside of the box, so to speak, and making something like this happen. I'm glad we're at this step. I'm supporting this, obviously. I think it's a good utilization of funds. I also think it's a great, it would be a great service to our city as a whole. So with that, and I also would like to lastly just say, yes, the STAR program needs to be amended, specifically its geographical limitations. I've talked to several businesses outside of the historical or present geographical limitations on the STAR program that could have used that, but unfortunately couldn't. Their project still went forward, but it's putting more financial pressure on them because they couldn't apply. So I applaud you for looking at that and saying, hey, we need to make it work better. So thank you, staff. Thank you, Councilor Walker and Councilor Gary. I'll open it up to the council for any comments. Councilor Lasagna.
Thank you very much for this. I'm glad that we have something that was well thought out and ready to go. I just want to be cautious about moving forward with things like this that are not part of, say, the CIP. I know it's different monies, but in the past we've said to other people who've come forward asking to use funds that turned up for them in a way that wasn't initially laid out for us. I do support this. The other thing I want to mention is we should be prepared when this kind of windfall as it is comes forward to move forward with it. This is a quick turnaround for a good amount of money. We're not going to go into details about it, but I would hope that we'd be better prepared in the future. We're prepared to work on this particular project, but we don't want to turn money back, and we also don't want to just use it in a way that is not appropriate in terms of our planning, our CIP, our strategic planning.
Any other comments? None?
I just think the senior project has been, in the limelight for a long time, but it's basically not too long ago was on hold. We weren't getting anywhere, and I think right now is a time to get things done that we need to get done. And if we don't do that, we are going to miss out on the funds. But it is time for us to really put some money into that program if we're going to do anything at all. I've talked with a lot of people who are in different places, or if they move, they said the first thing that they did was these are retired people, went to the senior center to get information, to get, their needs met in some sort. So we have long ignored the seniors, and I'm one of them, but I'm not being ignored, but I'm just saying, I'm thinking in terms of, where would I go if I came to a town all by myself and retired, what would I do? So I think this is money well spent in this case, and I do agree that we do need to be thoughtful about any expenditures. If we have a windfall, if we're starting to get monies back, let's discuss it together and plan ahead, and so it's not a knee-jerk reaction. But this is something we really, really need to do. And I'm going to bring forth another idea, not tonight, but something I picked up from a gentleman at the inauguration, and it was a wonderful, wonderful idea dealing with seniors. So we'll talk about that later at another time. Thank you very much.
Councilor Walker, did you have something?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, go for it.
I want to thank you, Mike, for working with us. And I know this looks like it's a quick snap of the finger thing, but this is something that's been going on for a long period of time. And it's something we've been looking at, working with the city manager as well as with that department, because if we're lucky, we have some funds to work with that came about fairly quickly. And they had to watch what they were doing in order for us to find out that these funds were actually there or coming in for us to be able to use. So it's not like we snapped our fingers and everything came together. We've been working on this for months, and we've been trying to put a package together that would make the council happy with what it sees, and it takes a long time to put a lot of these things together, so we couldn't have a whole package to give to you a month ago because we didn't have all the information a month ago. That keeps taking the hours and the time that these people already don't have time to be spending on our project, so we have to kind of fit them in these little places where we can. Otherwise than that, we would have had a plan that's drawn on paper. We would have had someone with architect, engineering, and all of the above to show you exactly what Mike is almost ready to produce to us now. But we really didn't have the okay to go ahead forward with it. And we knew what we wanted, and we knew what our plan was going to bring us. It's just things are starting to come together now where we can really say to this council, we finally have nailed this plan down where it's going to work for all of us.
Agreed. Just a couple points that have come up. I think from a CIP standpoint, we did have, correct me if I'm wrong, either $40,000 or $50,000 set aside in last year's CIP. I'm not even sure if we expended that yet, and hopefully we haven't, but it was prepared for the kitchen expenditure. So, well, I'd like to see all the CIP information, because I know we had this in. We're looking at kind of a slow, drawn-out process over the years. This actually accelerates us. So let's look at this for our workshop, if you could, Mr. Manager, next week on the 14th. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very excited about this project. I've been working to try to get this senior center completed for 5 years. I worked on it as a counselor. I worked on it when I wasn't a city councilor on side projects. And now that I'm back, Councilor Walker and I have been working hard. We both feel that the senior center is like a cornerstone of the whole recreational complex there. We want to turn that whole facility area, or our vision, well, my vision and his, to a certain degree, is turn that whole Pettingill Park into a recreational center where all people of all ages can go and participate in whatever their interests are, and to have the senior center that's primarily for seniors, but when there's no senior activity, it can be used for community events as well, not just exclusive seniors, but that's the bulk of what's going in there. So other events can go in there and can help generate some revenues to help pay the expenses for the building and not interfere with whatever monies that come in for the Hasty Community Center or Ingersoll. So I'm very charged, and I do thank you, and I do thank the council for jumping on board and supporting the seniors and those that are physically challenged.
I'm gonna ask for, just because Mr. Chamings, you did ask for consensus from the council. This is not a vote, of course, by any chance, or a resolution. But does Mr. Chamings and the rest of the staff have the consent, the majority here approve of moving forward, at least presenting a plan for us to look at in the future?
I'd like to see it move forward because I believe in it, but I want to make sure that it's a part of larger thinking with
Agreed.
Everything else we're doing and not isolated.
But at least we'll give them the thumbs up to keep moving forward with the process of planning. Okay,
one question real quick, go ahead. Is it, you say that we have to spend the money by April 30th, or we lose it, or what's the deal there?
We have timeliness that we have to deal with at the 1.5, so if our goal is to get everything done by April 30th. If we do not have everything done by April 30th, we have to do a spend down plan, so we don't automatically lose those funds, but we have to show them that spend down. Then we get pretty much a black mark on our audit. So our goal is to expend the funds by April 30th and have the project completed.
And we're going to go into detail on the 14th during workshop.
Well, no, because going back to what Councilor Lasagna was talking about, CIP, and I'm a big fan of annual budgets and voting on a budget as a whole. And I would much rather see something like this as part of a budget item that we vote on along with everything else, and the fund revenue comes from CBDG funding. And as part of a CIP, so that we know that it's official and in there. I'm a little bit nervous about rushing and spending $300,000 before we even have talk about budgets, unless we have to. If it's that or lose it, then, you know.
And again,
We'll lose it.
Yeah, let's.
Well, I'm not sure if that threat is true. that
Yeah,
we would
and one thing you want to keep in mind, this is a project that's been funded in the past, it's going to be scheduled to be funded in the future. These funds that we're putting into it are going to take away from the amount that needs to be raised from property taxation, including some of the current CIP. So currently, that money that you put it in, you're working down there in the kitchen and electrical. Whatever's crucial, we were going to, not crucial, we were going to put a stop to that so we can put it into our package and fund that out of federal funds and not out of the CIP funds that was raised either from bond or from property taxation.
Yeah, and that's very good. I mean, I like that idea, just like I say, I don't like to be put in a position where spend it or lose it if that's the threat. And I want to know that that's true before we go.
Yeah, and this is coming very quickly to the agenda, Mr. Manager. You'd like to?
Yeah, just to add on to what Michael Chamings has already said, and to address the question that Councilor Titus is raising. I worked with the Community Development Block Grant Program for the City of Lewiston and in Cumberland County, and HUD has very strict requirements regarding the spending of CDBG dollars, and as Michael has indicated, because of what's happened with the STAR program and other factors, we do need to spend the money by April 30th, or we're going to end up returning the money. And I think this is a worthwhile project, obviously. This is an opportunity. Like you, Councilor Titus, I don't like to do things outside of the budget process either, unless there's a situation that presents itself like the one that we're facing now, which I think is a good opportunity for the city. So we need to take advantage of the opportunity. And it's going to be a challenge to do this, to fast track it. We had a meeting with staff the other day talking about how to do this, and it will not be a simple process, but I think it'll be worthwhile.
And again, more details, and I thank everybody for putting all the details together for our January 14th workshop, the special workshop that I called early or late last week. So just by a quick show of hands here, so far people, straw vote, how are you feeling about this moving forward, at least preliminarily? Nothing we do in the straw vote is concrete, of course. Yes? Yeah. One, two. Everybody's nodding, raising a hand. Okay. Mr. Chamings, please commence with your due diligence.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for all the work you've put into this.
Next, legislative issues, discussion with City Manager Peter Creighton. We'll be presenting. I as well sit on MMA's policy advocacy board. I am a voting member representing the City of Auburn, along with the city manager. I'm going to stay up here. We went to the meeting up in Augusta not that long ago, so you know we'll go from there. But I just wanted, for full disclosure, let you know that I'm also a voting member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. As you know, we have a workshop coming up next Monday with our legislative delegation. I want to be able to sit with you this evening to review 10 issues. And there may be others that are not in my memo that you feel are important. Certainly would like to get a sense as to what you think before we have the workshop with the legislative delegation next Monday at the arena. As the mayor indicated, we both sit on the Legislative Policy Committee for the Maine Municipal Association. The mayor is the representative from Auburn. I was elected by the surrounding municipalities because there was a vacancy, so we're fortunate that we have 2 votes for the City of Auburn. I'm going to start in no particular order with the revenue sharing topic that I mentioned in my memo. The MMA's Legislative Policy Committee would like to see the funding return to full funding, which would mean there would be an increase in municipal revenue sharing to the City of Auburn of $2.5 million. I don't know how realistic this is at this point in time. We're going to find out in the days ahead and the weeks ahead as to where this is in terms of priorities of legislators and the governor. This certainly would help the city. Right now we budget about $1.7 million in municipal revenue sharing, which is obviously very helpful and helps taxpayers in the community. We will be working on this. Hopefully you're supportive of that. As the mayor indicated, is there a consensus to support that?
Without comment, consensus?
Any opposition?
Definitely.
Okay. The next issue on the local option sales tax, this was discussed at the Legislative Policy Committee meeting as well. As you know, the Legislative Policy Committee represents small municipalities to the largest municipalities in the state. There are certain communities like Auburn that are service center communities. The local option sales tax would help us in terms of the services that we have to provide to citizens as a result of the fact that we are a service center community. In the case of local option sales tax, what is being discussed at this point, and by the time the legislature adjourns, there could be different changes to this discussion, but the local option sales tax, they're talking about an increase of 1% on the retail meals and lodging sales, subject to the state sales tax. The estimate in terms of what that would mean to the city of Auburn is $7.6 million annually. Again, I'd like to get a sense from you as to whether you're supportive of the concept. This is something that I expect is going to probably have some changes as we go forward. There are some people who have talked about doing something that would commit the service center communities to lowering the property tax. I certainly, as city manager for the city of Auburn, would like to see any increase in, like this from a local option sales tax be used to help lower the property tax for the city of Auburn, help fund the new high school. Those are kind of the thoughts that I'm having at this point in time. This would be a very difficult bill to get through the legislature. When I worked for the city of Lewiston, there were efforts to try and impose a local option sales tax, and it has never been successful. That doesn't mean that we should try. I'd like to know whether you're okay with it.
If I could just, from the other voting member's opinion, I will not support an increase in any sort way means of sales tax or any tax therefore, but I will say that I believe a working group and a lobbying group, especially in utilizing all the assets we have in order to get a larger, much larger sum, specifically 20% of the existing sales tax that's being charged as direct rev share to the community in which it was generated, would achieve roughly the same amount without increasing taxes any further. But there is a point here, and this is government, and negotiation is important. Okay, so this is all part of that grand scheme. So I would encourage support for moving forward and lobbying our legislative delegation through various sources, whether it be MMA or the Service Center Coalition, or as individuals or as a council, in order to have them recognize the fact that there is a significant cost to generating the sales tax that so many other communities in the state enjoy on our backs. So that's just my point of view from being at these meetings. Councilor Young?
I just don't know how that would be welcomed by some businesses within the city. I mean, would people still have the added value tax in Auburn, would shop here versus tax-free someplace else?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's an interesting question. City of Lewiston recently had a legislative workshop, and actually I sat next to Ed Barrett at the Legislative Policy Committee meeting, City Administrator for Lewiston, when we were having this discussion as a group, and they would benefit as well. I don't know whether the City Council will be supportive of this. I think they would be, but I don't know that for a fact. So you may have a case where you have both cities that have local option sales tax, and I think that would help diminish concern about people choosing to go to Lewiston versus coming to Auburn. Again, I think when you look at the issue, most areas of the country have a local option sales tax, and they are able to impose that to help defray the costs of services and to help local taxpayers. I think it's a tool that we have available to us if the legislature would be supportive. But again, I'm looking for direction from the council.
Council, thoughts? Councilor Hayes?
Well, thank you. I think the mayor actually was linking the local option sales tax back to the revenue sharing. And I think revenue sharing, is coming from sales tax revenues to the state.
Yes.
So we're talking essentially the same thing.
Yeah,
Revenue sharing was...
The formulas are different. The formulas are different. And revenue sharing also comes from income tax as well. So revenue sharing comes from a multiple amount of fronts. Revenue basically coming into the state coffers, going back out to municipalities. This is specifically talking about sales tax generated within the city. Some interesting stats. Auburn produced last year $780 million in sales, period, sales, versus Lewiston's, I think it was $300 million.
That's right.
Yeah, we're one of the largest, I think top 2 or 3 in the state on sales. No,
right.
Just actual gross amount of sales data. So it's pretty, this is where these numbers are being derived from at 1%. There's some other options there. It could be 0.5%, could be a quarter, but this is specifically tied into sales tax on items versus property tax relief generated from income tax.
But wasn't revenue sharing really the intent to help support service centers, recognizing that they were...
That's what the original intent was. And they
Well,
didn't
it's
follow through.
to help all the municipalities in the state. All municipalities receive revenue sharing. Certainly the service center communities have advocated that they should be getting more because of the services that we're providing.
And I guess that's my argument. I guess I share the concern that Councilor Young raised. I mean, would we have a choice as to what we're going to apply, and maybe Lewiston would apply a different sales option tax?
Well, I think what would happen in the legislature if it passes, which is probably an uphill battle, there would be a bill that would be passed in the legislature that would, I would imagine, provide municipalities with the opportunity to be able to impose a local option sales tax. And I think there would probably be language that would probably be pretty specific in terms of what the municipalities can do. Again, this is a work in progress at this point. It can change. I don't have to, if you want to think about this more, which I can certainly appreciate, and hear what legislators have to say at the legislative workshop, we can certainly do that. This is discussions going to be going on for some time.
Yeah, and then, Mr. Mayor,
I guess I go back to what the mayor said. If we can use it as a bargaining chip to increase our revenue sharing percentage opposed to some of the smaller communities, I'd be all for it. But to impose an entirely new tax, I think we are going to have the concern that Councilor Young raised, be just like New Hampshire, Maine.
Yeah, so here's the double-edged sword for this discussion that we're having together right now. If anything is being used from a position of negotiating strength, we erode that position of negotiating strength by having that discussion, the merits of it right now, especially if it's being reported in the press and members of the legislature see it and they're like, well, no, there's really not support for this. It's an interesting, I throw that out there. As we're negotiating, we shouldn't be negotiating against ourselves. We should be supporting a position in which we can get the biggest possible gain with minimizing the impact on the residents, right? So I say that, just a cautionary note on how we talk and direction we give. But this is definitely something I think should be carried over into the workshop on Monday with the delegation.
Right.
But, of course, comments.
Just to sort of piggyback on what you just said, I wonder if was any discussion with MMA about sort of tiering these. Are there low-hanging fruit that it's worth to put energy in immediately? Are there things, for example, some of this property tax relief that we know is going to be a more difficult lift and we should think about in the future instead of taking these all at the same face value?
Very good question. My experience has been that the MMA is very astute about that, and they will recognize if they need to give in order to get somewhere else in terms of the legislative agenda that they have. So I think it'll, some of these things can be a bargaining chip and certainly can help with the discussion.
And your presence would be our input into sort of deciding which to push forward and which to sort of maybe wait on?
Well, I think in terms of the legislative process, what the MMA Legislative Policy Committee decided the other day is that this would be one of the priorities. And what will happen is we will have meetings in the next few weeks as we go forward during the legislative session. They'll report back to us on what's going on, and we'll probably get emails as well, I would imagine, and have the opportunity to go to Augusta.
So it'll begin to shake out a little bit in terms of what it's worth putting a lot of our time and energy and thought into?
Yeah, I mean, this is all going to shake out. There's going to be committee hearings. I mean, I've spoken last session several times in front of committees, either supporting or not supporting different issues in Augusta. This will happen again.
Right.
The city manager, myself, mayor of Portland, other members will all be going up there lobbying and pushing hard for the interests, as well as, the representatives from rural towns. So, and we got a taste of that, I think, at the meeting, which everybody was involved in. And it was interesting to hear the different discussion points. It's our goal this year to give a lot of updates to the council, to let you know how it's working, get feedback, solicit opinion, and also, protect our negotiating strength and our platform. And that's important, especially as we're going up there. And your continual feedback and the residents' feedback to our delegation to make sure they're staying strong and representing what's best for the city. Councilor Young?
Mr. Mayor, my understanding, revenue sharing is sort of based on evaluation and population is part of it. And maybe it's a little bit more complicated than that.
It's always more complicated than that.
But it is where Lewiston may not be collecting as much in sales tax, but they get rewarded more because their population and the evaluation. Yeah. So even Lewis and Auburn may have about similar evaluation, but, and I guess that's why you might suggest having a local sales tax if you're going to recoup the same amount of money. If the people will come to Auburn and pay that added value sales tax, I guess it's a gamble. I mean, how is it, tourist industry sometimes complains because of an added value of housing, lodging and things. People don't come to Maine as much. How much can you tax until the people say, well, they're going to vote with their feet and go someplace else? But I look forward to the discussion.
I know there's another item to be discussed during the workshop period. Let me just mention the other topics for the viewing audience. Another topic is property tax relief for seniors, adult use marijuana tax revenue, homestead exemption, county inmate health care costs. On the property tax relief for seniors, the idea is to have the legislature revisit legislation that was last acted upon in 1991 to provide a program to help senior homeowners. The bill would increase the household income threshold. And the adult use marijuana, you're talking about non-medical marijuana products to allow municipalities to benefit some revenue from marijuana establishments in the communities. Homestead exemption, looking at trying to increase the reimbursement percentage. It's now 62.5%, which provides revenues of $1.1 million annually to the city of Auburn. Of course, the homestead exemption is not 100% reimbursed, so the non-homestead owners in the community have to pay more in order to make up the difference. County inmate health care costs, inmate medical costs in the county jails is a huge cost driver for the jails, as I think you all know. This legislation would help clarify existing Medicaid eligibility for incarcerated individuals and establish a mechanism to make sure individuals who are eligible for such coverage are able to apply and renew their limited coverage while they are incarcerated. Also, there's legislation on opioids. The idea behind that is to try and have the legislature continue their efforts with increased funding and grant programs. Of course, the governor has already made a statement on that, to saying that she's going to make that a priority by appointing someone to be in charge of the opioids program at the state level to get more action regarding that issue. Public transit is another topic. Right now, Maine invests $1.5 million annually into public transportation. There are many people and folks who are involved in the Maine Department of Transportation's 2025 Transit Strategic Plan that think that we should be trying to increase that funding pretty dramatically in order to have acceptable level of service or transit in Maine. That would require more dollars. There's also legislation to try and provide more funding for municipalities on 911. And then there's legislation regarding small cell technology and fiber optics and broadband to try and make sure that municipalities are able to have broadband technology and fiber optics as an economic advantage. So those are issues that have been identified. There may be others that you may have on your mind. And again, we have the legislative workshop next Monday with the legislative delegation, which I'm looking forward to and should be very interesting.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Titus.
Real quick, I just want to bring up when you talked about the county inmate health care costs, and that is a real issue for the jail.
Yes.
But the entire jail funding formula, and they were so gracious to take away a lot of funding and then allow them to go up 3%, raise more money out of property taxes, which that was the state's answer to fund the jails, is you could raise property taxes to get the money. And really, when you look at the jail and how much of the expense over there in that jail is caused by state and federal laws, not by local laws, we end up absorbing a lot of costs that we shouldn't. And it's been one delegation after another who either has tried to fight and failed or hasn't tried hard enough to get the jail funding, maybe not back where it was when they had the system, the jail system, but somehow get more money, get the funding that's required to run that jail so that it's not on our backs. Because that's a very expensive, as you know, Council Foley knows very well what that is, and we can't control it. We don't know what kind of inmate population is going to be. Usually it's going up. So really, that subject is very important, but not just the medical side. We need to have them look at the whole funding formula for that jail, because that's just, again, they just allowed them to go up on property taxes to raise extra money that they need instead of having the state fund what they should. So I want that added to that.
I totally agree with Councilor Titus, because at the county level, we've discussed this for, all the time. And you're right, wrap that up into also the formula for, our jails. But it's unbelievable how much money the county spends for covering Medicaid and covering their medical. They're all on medication. And if you don't put them on medication, you've got a real problem on your hands. And it's been extremely out of control. So that would rise to the top, that plus the formula for funding our jails.
Well, we'll make sure that everybody knows when the testimonies are being accepted up in Augusta. Hopefully you all make the trip. I think your opinions would be great. I know the city manager and myself will be speaking, for the city of Auburn on all these topics, and we'll keep in contact throughout the process. Mr. Manager, do you have anything to add in closing?
No, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Look forward to the workshop next Monday.
Yes, me too.
Last, we have a dangerous building issue with Mr. Eric Cousins presenting today.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Normally when we're bringing you a dangerous building, we are asking you to review the information, find that it's dangerous, and order a property owner to abate the violations. And if they don't, allowing the city to move forward with demolition, then to try to recoup the demolition costs through a tax lien. In this case, the city already owns the building, and over the last number of months, the conditions at the building have continued to deteriorate. They've been challenging for quite a number of years. The fire department and planning and code has worked closely with the property owners as they've changed over time to try to keep the building as safe as it can be, tried to maintain an operating sprinkler system in the building, and recently the fire department and code enforcement officer learned that there's no longer electricity in the building, there's no longer service to the water service to the building. So the building is without any kind of a fire suppression system or sprinkler. Normally we would ask you to order the building to be demolished. Where the city owns it, we don't think that's necessary for you to order the city itself to demolish the building, but we also recognize that it's a substantial expense that we anticipate for demolition. We have the funds in the approved budget for the current year to take care of the hazardous building, but we wanted you to be aware of it, that our intention is to put this building out to bid for demolition in a competitive process, try to minimize the cost, barring any objections from the council. That's what we will do after this meeting.
Mr. Cousins, thank you. Is there any brownfield grants? Because I'm going to assume, based upon your memorandum, that there is significant toxic material present within this building?
We don't have a lot of time to wait to apply for something like that, and we don't have an end reuse plan for the site, which is usually one of the critical pieces to using brownfields money. It's a very steep slope. I'm not sure that most of the site will be usable once the building is gone. So I don't think it would be eligible for brownfields, but we could ask the question at AvCog that does, I believe, have some current assessment grants.
Council comments, questions?
Yes, it's on a riverbank. Whereabouts is that?
So this is, as you come around the rotary and you can take a right into Maine Oxy. If you can picture that driveway entrance, you would pull into Maine Oxy, cross the railroad tracks and turn left, parallel to the railroad tracks. It's kind of tucked away to the left of Maine Oxy. You can also access the building if you continue on Minot Avenue, take a right onto High Street and then a right onto Hutchins. It's a little dead-end street that accesses the backside of the park that connects into the Riverwalk system. It's not a very visible building from the street, Moulton Park, with the skateboarding park.
Right.
Where the old Falcon rule.
I'm sorry, a little back. When did we take ownership of this building?
I don't know exactly when the tax acquisition took place on this one.
This is owned by Mr. Peter Furland up as of at least May of 2018.
So I could get an answer to that. My understanding is that the tax acquisition may have happened before Mr. Furland bought the property. So what he thought he was buying, the previous owner didn't have the ability to sell, but I'd have to confirm that. I think it was more recently than that for the
No,
tax.
I think it was a while ago.
A number of years ago, from what I understand. I don't think, we thought Mr. Furland owned the building. I'm not sure that he ever had full, clear title to the property. There may have been a pending lien prior to his purchase.
Do you think there's any chance that Maine Oxy would ever buy the land after the building's gone?
Maine Oxy has expressed an interest in the upper part of the land before the steep slope heads down to Hutchins Street. They wouldn't want to take on the liability of owning the building, but they would be interested in some of the land. And the owner at the end of Hutchins Street also may have an interest in additional land without the liability of the building.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Cousins.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I will end the workshop, and we will stand in recess until our regular council meeting at 7 in approximately 10 minutes.
can't do that.
That kind of thing.
It's totally.
What do planning board do? Someone recused himself. It's good for everybody. So we come out. And we're back. Good evening. I'll now call to order this meeting of January 7th, 2019. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have two consent items on the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion that under the consent items, order number 02-0107-2019 be taken off the consent agenda and put in order in the new business.
I have a motion on the floor right now to take order 02-0107-2019 off the consent agenda item agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? 701. We will now take that order 02-0107-2019 off the consent agenda. Okay. Do I have a motion on order 01-0107-2019?
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Councilor Titus and a second from Councilor Fournier. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? None being? That order number is approved by a vote of 7-0. Okay, coming back to order number 02-0107-2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion for Councilor Fournier, a second for Councilor Walker. Okay, we'll open it up to...
Point of order?
Oh,
This needs to go in the new business.
That would be
Oh.
moved to new business.
That's new business.
Yes.
It's been moved to new business.
I'm sorry.
Thank
We'll
you.
move that to NB.
Too many.
Trying to get too efficient on you. We're going to move on to the minutes for December 17th, 2018, our regular council meeting. Are there any corrections? None being? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move that we approve December 17th, 2018's minutes.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Fournier and a second from Councilor Walker. Show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? None being? Minutes are accepted. 7-0. We're going to move on to communications, presentations, and recognitions. Right now, we have a communication from Holly Olivier. Olivier? Olivier. Got it right, finally, after a year. To talk about health and social services update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, councilors and Mr. Manager. I am Holly Olivier, the Director of the Health and Social Services Department, and I'm here today with my department update. Not too many changes since the last time I met with you. My office remains a department of 1.5 staff, consisting of Laura Johnson, who's my part-time assistant, and myself. The primary function of my department is to work with the needy individuals who actually fall below the poverty level, along with the asylum seekers who are unable to work for several months. It takes about 5 months after they arrive in the country to get the work authorization cards. And as you know, we offer assistance with basic necessities only, and that includes housing, food, heat, and electricity. We work together with the state government to ensure that these individuals are not homeless or hungry. The other key functions include daily appointments with my clients, including frequent drop-ins for assistance. I schedule, monitor, and verify all workfare hours, that's volunteer hours within the city, monitor English classes, job searches, and job trainings. And I continue to require all work-eligible clients to register at the Career Center. They need to participate in resume writing classes and attend the job fairs once a month. And I also monitor the due dates for the asylum seekers regarding the deadlines to apply for their employment cards and their Social Security cards. And that's really important because once those come in, they're able to look for work and become employed. I also attend monthly and quarterly trainings and seminars to be kept up to date on protocol and any changes in the protocol. And as you know, I complete the monthly billing reports to the state for the 70% the reimbursement comes into the city from the state. And as a general reminder, in order to receive these benefits, any able-bodied clients have to participate in the workfare program and perform the job searches and the trainings and all that. If they're a new Mainer, they're expected to attend English classes, and I verify that as well. And the progress is monitored on a weekly basis to determine if they're in compliance. And they need to be in compliance in order to continue to receive the benefits from the city, or otherwise they could be denied. As far as the challenges go, the biggest challenge by far in my department is unpredictability. There's no way to predict things that would likely determine my budget for any given year, and those things include like the cost of heating oil, the electricity standard offers, the weather, the economy, natural disasters, and lack of affordable housing. Also includes the influx or lack thereof of the new Mainers. And again, that can be hindered because of the lack of housing in the area. So with that being said, it can be difficult in planning an upcoming budget. What I typically use to determine the new fiscal year is to compare the numbers from the prior fiscal year. For example, this time last year, I was able to grant help to 173 households. And so far this year, I've been able to assist 121 households. So there's been a decrease because, again, the housing is just not out there. There's no availability for housing.
Is it availability, or is it because of decrease the need is lower?
It's because the amount that we're able to pay the landlords, it's very hard to find a landlord that will accept the amount that my office is able to pay. And when someone comes into the area and they find an apartment, recently they've been staying there. They don't want to leave because if they do, they can't find another rent for that inexpensive fee, I should say. So when they come into the area and they find a place, they stay. And so with that being said, there's no affordable housing that falls into my guidelines because it's very low. So some accomplishments in my department are thanks to the generous donations of the city employees and many residents, I opened up a clothing bank in my office, and this has been a really big help with my clients, especially this time of year with blankets, coats, bedding, any sort of warm clothing. It's very important, and they're very grateful to be able to have access when they come in for an appointment. They're off the street, they're cold, they see a winter coat, they get to take that, and it's a big deal for them, so that's really appreciated. I've also been able to successfully provide a wide range of general information and resources to people, because what happens is a big portion of what I do in my department is assisting with drop-ins and phone calls. Oftentimes people will stop into my office when they're not sure where else to go or where to start. So depending on their situation, I can provide lists of resources, contact information, and all that in order to give them direction as to where to proceed from there. And lastly, I'm able to offer guidance and information regarding the job fairs, how to seek out help with resume writing, interviewing skills, and where to go for job training. Because of this, many of my clients have been able to find good paying jobs and they've become self-sufficient. This includes the new Mainers. I've assisted several new Mainers in becoming confident job seekers where their English might be lacking or whatnot, but once they're gainfully employed, they're financially independent, and now they're productive members of the community, and I'm very proud that they're able to do that. So that's the update in a nutshell, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
First of all, thank you very much for the work that you're doing.
Yes,
we appreciate it. Council, any comment or questions?
Just one question. Do you see any trends in comparison to last year and perhaps the year before that?
It's definitely slowed down a little bit. It's decreased because, again, I feel that people coming into the area, there's just not the available housing, and so now we're seeing people move even further up Bangor area. you know, it's the housing is just really the big hindrance.
Do you have any statistics showing past efforts and have you been tracking, let's say, people who received assistance in 2016? Are they currently receiving assistance? Are they off receiving assistance and self-sustaining?
The new Mainers would not be receiving assistance because what happens is as soon as they get their work cards, they get out there and they find jobs. And that usually takes between 6 and 8 months with everything all together. So if they came in 2016, they would have been employed within 6 to 8 months.
It might be beneficial and Mr. Manager, I'll turn this over to you without any undue stress or burden upon staff, to look at some long-term trackability. Not just on numbers of initiates, if you would, those first-time applicants, but what happened to someone who applied in 2015? New Mainer, not new Mainer, so on and so forth. Are they still residing in the city? Are they off public assistance at this point? Are they at a certain level of self-sustainability? I think that would be nice as a kind of a 5-year plan. I think, Councilor Forney, that's what you're kind of getting at as well? Kind of that trend line. It's always nice to see if there's a return on investment of what your office is doing. I'm sure there is, but you got to quantify it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other comments or
I
questions?
agree. It would be nice to just have a little summary of statistics of who is coming into your office and what services are provided. But again, not to take up too much of your time, Ms. Olivier, I know how busy you are.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too.
Next on, we have Mr. Sid Hazelton, Superintendent of the Auburn Water and Sewer Districts, who is here to provide an update on Lake Auburn's water quality. Happy New Year, Mr. Hazelton. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me see. Got a few slides. Let's see if I can get those going. Yes, thank you for inviting me here tonight, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, and City Manager. It's a pleasure to be able to come here tonight and talk to you about Lake Auburn water quality. I was called by the City Manager about a month and a half ago. If you followed the news and if you are a water customer, you realize we've had a very busy summer and fall. We have had some water quality issues, and I really do appreciate this opportunity. I think there's a lot of information out there. A lot of people will kind of fill in the gaps. I'm hoping I can do that tonight and give you some information that will be helpful to you. Just give you a little bit of background first. I won't bore you with this, but if you're not familiar with the water district, Lake Auburn is the only public water supply for Lewiston and Auburn. Quite simply, we put out water that meets all drinking water standards. We do treat it with chlorine, ultraviolet light. We adjust the pH and the alkalinity of the water. We add an orthophosphate, which is there to prevent corrosion of the pipes. And we add fluoride to help battle tooth decay. One important distinction, the water that we supply is not filtered. I'll just read this, due to the historically excellent water quality, the Auburn Water District was granted a waiver from filtration in 1993 by the Maine Drinking Water Program. That's the organization that oversees all the drinking water systems in Maine. That waiver, it's very, very tenuous. It can be pulled if there are efforts to relax lake protection efforts or if the water fails to meet drinking water standards. As a result of that waiver, we do have some of the lowest water rates in the state. You can see at this chart, I know that's, I apologize, you probably can't read the names at the bottom, but those are all the major water systems in Maine. You can see where Auburn water comes in. We're clearly in the lower third of the water rates in the state of Maine. And this, again, is due to our maintenance of that waiver of filtration.
Mr. Hazelton, could you please pinpoint Lewiston on that graph? Just for a little quick neighborly comparison.
Yes, Lewiston is right, I can't see it this, I've got a pointer.
Yeah, it doesn't work on TV. So
oh, it doesn't. Lewiston is approximately 3 bars up that chart from Auburn. They're a little bit higher than we are. And again, this chart is, it's about a year old, and I know, as a matter of fact, a lot of the districts that are lower than Auburn have since leapfrogged over us. So we do remain at the lower end of the spectrum. Yes.
Not to interrupt.
Sure, anytime.
I'm going to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
Can you mention some of the locations that are below Auburn on that graph? That will be helpful, I think.
Well, the third one in.
Even if you have to get up off of your chair and go look at them.
You've got, well, I'll read them all. You've got Orono, VZ, Biddeford, Saco. That's one that I mentioned is going to very quickly leapfrog to the top of that chart. You've got Portland Water District, Kittery, Pittsfield, Lisbon, Holton, Bangor, Yarmouth, Rumford, and then us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Now, obviously, keeping water rates low, we want growth as much as the next person there. So keeping water rates low is a key component to economic growth. A lot of people will ask, well, you know, you might have some issues. Why can't we filter the water, put in a filter tank? I've done a fair amount of research in this area.
Sorry, Mr. Hazelton, I'm going to interrupt. When we invited you here, we wanted you to talk about the current or maybe near past, not filtration, but the algae, the taste, the aesthetics of the water?
That's if you just...
I know,
I can skip over that if you like.
For time constraints, I want to make sure that we're focused on the current aesthetic issues of the water.
I'll zip through this and I'll get right to that, if it's okay.
Good.
But you can see this slide as well as me. These are some of the plants that are in Maine. They're up in the 22 to 30 million dollar range. Saco's got one going in 45, and I will go over these very quickly. We did have a study done. Wright Pierce did a study for us. This is an excerpt out of a 3-page thing they did for us. They've estimated that it would cost $45 to $47 million to have a filtration plant go in for us. That's a 16 million gallon a day filtration facility. I do believe ours would be slightly smaller than that, but that's a good conservative estimate. Weston Sampson is an outfit that did another small study for us. There was a lot of plants that went in the New England area. They were in the $30 million range. If you add carbon to that, which is something we would need to do, again, you're up in over the $30 million range to have that go in. The impacts of a $35 million filter plant, this would be split with Lewiston. We'd need to bond $17.5 million for construction. Annual operation would be $1.5 million. That would be again split with Lewiston. We would need a 50% rate increase to cover the additional cost if we were to put in a filter plant. For a typical family, that would make their water bill go up $125 a year. So that's the bottom line of a filter plant. One thing people might not realize, fire protection. We have to charge, in accordance to the PUC formula, a charge for fire hydrants based upon revenue. Currently, it's $670,000. If we put in a filter plant, that would go up to $1 million a year assessment for the city. Even if we did lose the waiver, watershed protection efforts would remain in place. We have been subject to algae, which I'll get into in just a second, but algae can foul filters and significantly increase the treatment costs, and filters may or may not eliminate taste and odor issues associated with algae. We did almost lose our filtration waiver on a couple of different times back in 1995. Right after we received our waiver, we discovered that there was bacterial contamination in the lake. It was traced back to seagulls. Since then, we have contacted the USDA, and they have a harassment program to keep them off the lake, and that's been effective. Back in 2012, we had an algae bloom that caused the oxygen levels in the lake to plummet. This is a picture I took. When the oxygen got depleted from the water, it actually affected lake trout, and they were surfacing. There was not enough oxygen for them to survive. That was the first real taste we got of what could happen when you have algae blooms in a lake. Every lake, there are over 100, probably hundreds of different types of algae you can find in a lake. Every lake does have algae. A certain amount is needed to keep a lake healthy. It's when they get out of balance when it causes problems. This is a particular one that, this is actually a slide that was taken this fall from a sample of the water in Auburn. It's particular, I'm not going to bore you with details, but this is a blue-green algae called Anabina. The problem with this type of algae is it can release a toxin when it dies. And this was one of the algae that we did have back in that 2012 incident. And as I'll get into, we had one this year that had some of it as well. Sometimes it releases toxins, sometimes it doesn't. We test for it. We have never had a toxic release of algae in the lake. We did do a treatment this fall. On September 11th, we did do an algicide treatment. After the 2012 incident, we got a permit from the DEP, and it was to apply copper sulfate to the lake if we ever did have an algae bloom that was similar to 2012. The idea of an algae treatment, this is a graph. The blue line that goes up, that simulates an algae bloom. It grows, it blooms, and it dies off. It's a very simple organism, and that's what it does. A treatment of algicide is meant to be done before the bloom occurs so that you can bat it down so it doesn't cause problems. That's, in theory, what you try to do when you apply an algicide. This slide is important. This shows turbidity of the water. We test the water every day to see what it's doing. Turbidity is a measure of how cloudy the water is. This graph you see up here on the bottom, day, that's day 1 is January, day 361 is the end of the year. You can see we've charted the turbidity from 2012, 17, and 18. The vertical column is the turbidity values from 0, that scale goes up to 3.5. To stay within water parameters, we have to be under a 5. Just to give you an idea of levels of turbidity, 0 is crystal clear water. A cup of black coffee is like 1,300. So between 0 and 3.5, you could hold both of them up, you would not be able to tell the difference. They both look perfectly clear. If you look at the 2012 number, we're going along fine, then all of a sudden that starts to spike in the fall. That's when we had that slide I showed you where the fish were dying. As the weather got colder, the turbidity went down again, the ice came in, and we averted that crisis. If you look at 2018, just this last year we went through, you can see the turbidity going along, and it started to spike, similar to what it did back in 2012, but it occurred a couple of months sooner. At the top of that spike is where we applied an algicide to the lake. That was done on September 11th. And then you can see after that, the turbidity went down, right down out of sight, and that showed us that was an effective treatment. This is the boat that was out there in September that applied the algicide. They did a 300-acre application, kind of centered around our intake. So that was an effective program that we had. A little later on, after we had that initial algicide application, we got another type of algae that was present. It was called Cyanura. This is actually a slide that was taken, a sample that we took out of the lake. We got lots of calls this late summer and fall. People were getting a cucumber odor and taste of their water. This is what was doing it. It's called Cyanura. Our drinking water always met drinking water standards. This was an aesthetic issue that we had. But we certainly understand when the water doesn't taste right, people have questions, and we were very busy chasing that around and answering people's questions and concerns. This is a graph. We took tests every other day for the Cyanura algae. And again, I know you can't read this graph very well, but on the left is when we first started seeing it in the lake. You can see that it dropped down and is down to 0. The end of that graph is pretty much where we are today. There's no more of that algae present in the lake. The question that comes up, what's next? What are we going to do about this issue we have moving forward? There are a number of things we're doing. Number one is we need to continue to go ahead with our watershed protection efforts. We have a number of programs in place. We're pursuing grants. We're looking at our watershed. We're sampling the watershed to limit the amount of erosion that's occurring. This incident in 2012 was most likely triggered by some erosion event within the watershed. We couldn't identify exactly when or how it happened, but it was due to input of phosphorus into the lake. That's what caused that algae bloom. We're going to be increasing our monitoring. We're going to be taking samples every week out in the lake and looking at the slides and seeing what's there, so we can identify it before. Again, if it does come to a bloom condition, we'll hit it before it becomes a problem. We do still have our algicide permit in place for doing other applications of copper sulfate. One thing we're looking at that shows a lot of promise as well is an alum application. Right now we're applying to the state to get a permit for alum. That is a chemical that will bind with the phosphorus and send it to the bottom of the lake, and it will not be released. There are a number of different ways you can apply alum. You can do a bottom application, you can do a water column application, you can also do one at the tributaries around the lake when it's and triggered to discharge this alum when we're having a storm event. We're also looking at water chemistry treatment alternatives. There are some things we can do with our treatment process to potentially address that algae as well. That was quick, and I know I breezed over a lot, but I didn't want to take all your time. And questions regarding that?
Yeah, I'm going to just start off a little bit, if I could, please. Mr. Hazelton, thank you very much for the overview. We had a conversation about water filtration. And during that conversation, I'll tell the council and the public too, we discussed the possibility of looking at water filtration as an alternative together with Lewiston, with a panel of folks, people from a variety of different backgrounds, and looking at all the different options, including funding options. The federal and state level. I've taken the liberty of looking at both the federal and the state level just recently in preparation for a formation of this working group, and I found a significant amount of grants and zero interest loans and other type of forgivable loans, mind you, that are available to help us. I pose this question to you, I'm going to pose it again, I want everybody to think about it. If your car is about ready to die, Doug from Evergreen Subaru's in the audience, you probably can relate to this. You usually don't wait till the car is broken on the side of the road before you get a new one. You're probably going to pay a lot more than you want or you need. We need to really look at water quality, because even though the cost is low, I asked my mother how much she spends a month on Poland Spring water. Everybody on the council, lift up the water that you have, please. Show everybody. Everybody here has Poland Spring water. We're on city water here. My mother spends roughly $15 to $20 a month on potable water. Our businesses are suffering. Granted, the problem got better, but for a long period of time, something that's unpredictable. And we need consistency in our business and in our personal environment. The aesthetics of the water, the aesthetics, not the health and safety. We're marginal, if best. The increased cost on point-of-use systems, bottled water, alternate water sources, businesses, is pretty significant, and I think they need to be factored into this. But more importantly, I would like you to bring back to your board, and I'd like Councilor Titus, who is a member of the board, to bring forth a question about joining and formulating a working group to look at alternatives to current chemical treatment of water and go to our filtration, so we can plan this on our own time frame and not when we wake up one morning and get a letter from the powers that be saying your filtration license or waiver is going to be revoked. I want to be proactive. For all too long, we've been told one thing in this city, 70, 80 years now, longer than I've been alive and nor I can remember. It's time to look at a different reality. And I'd like to encourage you, as well as the board, to look at that reality. That's my statement on that. Anybody else have a comment?
My question has probably been asked before, but it's a no-brainer for some people probably, but not for me. You know, considering all of the residences around the lake, I mean, I'm sure that many of them are on septic tanks.
Yeah, there is no public sewer in the majority of the watershed around Lake Auburn.
So that, to me, I mean, isn't that having an impact on the lake to begin with?
The septic tank restrictions that are currently in Lake Auburn watershed are extremely.
Right, but I mean, you've got so many people living
If
around there now.
If there are any failed septic systems, we would know about them. We monitor the properties in the watershed. Not to say that they couldn't in the future, but we do monitor that, and
Yeah.
code enforcement with the city as well.
So if that's one of the things that you monitor, I think would be extremely important that would be one of the top things.
Right.
Because, I mean, people can do things sometimes that we don't know about.
Councilor Lasagna?
Just a small question. So you're unable to figure out where the phosphorus came from that may have caused this algae bloom?
This latest one was the one that occurred in 2012 was really the result of some internal phosphorus recycling. The underlying soil of the lake is made up of a mineral apatite, which naturally contains phosphorus. Over the years, just the runoff that's occurred, the bottom sediments of the lake contain a certain amount of phosphorus. That incident that happened in 2012, we did a lot of research on that. A lot of people spent a lot of time. We spent a lot figuring out why that happened. It was a combination of things, but one of them the things that happened is the lake went anoxic. There was no oxygen at the bottom of the lake, and that was due to the internal recycling of phosphorus from the bottom of the lake. This incident we had just this summer was not the same because there was good oxygen throughout the water column, but it was due to some type of external event that happened. We had a lot of heavy rainstorms that occurred, a lot of flash storms. It seems like we get more and more of those now. It's not a simple matter of gentle rain. When we get rain, we get heavy rain, and we think that caused some major event that washed a lot of sediments and nutrients into the lake. Couldn't identify exactly when or how it happened, but that's what resulted this year.
Councilor Titus?
Yeah, real quick, I just want, thank you, Sid, for we've sat a lot of hours in regular meetings, but it's good to bring this about. I believe I agree with the mayor where we need to research this and look into it. I think I mentioned in your presentation, I saw in your presentation, that Bangor and Portland were lower than us in water rates.
Yes, they were a little bit.
Bangor has filtration.
What's that?
Bangor is one of those that has filtration.
No, they don't.
They don't?
No, they're similar to us. They have a UV plant. That estimate was when they were going through their study whether or not they should filter their water.
I see, okay.
They ended up doing the same thing we did. They put in an ultraviolet light plant.
Okay. But I mean, I really think that we need to go down this road, and I really believe that if this only happens every couple of years, every 3 years, whatever, that it does put a real problem with visitors coming to the city. We know what it is, but a visitor that comes here and stays at the hotel or whatever is saying, wow. And who's going to want to, I mean, I really think that it has an effect that we don't see. It's a rippling effect. No pun intended. So, I mean, really, we need to at least look at it, and if we can't get funding, if it is impossible, then we find that out. But $125 more a year in the water bill, and you're paying $200 a month, $200 a year to buy bottled water because you don't want to drink what's coming out of the tap. I mean, those kind of comparisons people should have. I mean, we're talking about spending a lot of money on a high school, and some people want to spend $20 million in amenities, thinking that's going to bring in a lot of economic development. But we don't want to look at something like this, which I feel affects everybody, including visitors, when this kind of thing happens.
No,
So
and just so you know, I am totally on board with having more meetings like this, getting this information out there, and we're not hiding anything. I'm just trying to get the facts out there, and if we have more meetings and group discussions, I think that can only be good.
Good, then I think we should do that. I'm glad to hear that you're open to this. I was dismayed, to say the least, that this was not one of your 4 options going forward. I thought that would definitely be an option because you need to have that as an option. But
again, this isn't occurring in a vacuum. We talk I mean, I talk with the folks from Lewiston every day. Your idea of trying to get together and study this it's great, and it's not some novelty, and it's not some new thing. They're our partners, and we're ready to do whatever we need to do.
I just wish it would have happened before, but we'll make it happen now. That's okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Young.
My memory, the couple of years ago, we voted to study to see if we have an alternative source of water.
I remember that. I believe, Mr. Hazelton, you have the results of that study. I'm not sure if we're shared back.
The Auburn Water District funded a study to look at alternate sources of groundwater. We had a hydrogeologist outfit come in, and they looked at several areas within the Lake Auburn watershed. The ideal thing would have been to get some location that was at least close to our existing facility so we could draw the water in and treat it. There were a few promising areas. They did some test borings. We could not find a source that was going to be adequate for the volume we needed. We needed something in the area of 3 to 4 million gallons a day. The most promising area they found was a little under 2 million, so that was not worth pursuing any further. So groundwater, putting in wells to supplement the lake was not a viable option. We have all the data, but we did not go forward with it because there was just not enough there.
That's how Poland Springs gets theirs. They get it from a well.
Yeah, it's all a matter of hydrogeology and how much of an aquifer you have to tap into. And we just didn't have it in the locations that were close enough to our treatment plant. We were hopeful because there are, to the north of the lake, to the south of the lake, there are gravel pits there, and that's normally a good aquifer for finding groundwater. But there were too many lenses of Presumpscot clay.
My water supply comes from a quarter mile away, underneath the railroad tracks. It's a spring, and it's never run out.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a big difference between a spring for your house and when you're trying to get 4 million gallons a day.
I don't know how much you can get out of it.
That's a big leap.
It services 4 families.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions or comments for Mr. Hazelton? If not, we'll move along in our agenda.
No, just one really quick question. Are the people who are residents around the lake, are they restricted as to use of, chemicals for beautifying their lawns? I mean, I'm still concerned about that because there are so many houses being built.
We have a watershed manager. It's her job to become familiar with these people and make them aware of best land use practices. We can't restrict someone from fertilizing their lawn, just like anyone does. There are farms around the lake. There are horse farms around the lake. The lake is very susceptible to a number of threats. We've got, you've got Route 4, goes right by the lake. They salt and sand the road that goes right into the lake. There's a lot of threats to this fragile water supply.
I mean, we can keep chemicaling this to death or filtering it to death, but if things are happening around the lake, in terms of the ownership and people who are living there, we've got to look at that and say, how much of an impact is that?
But we can't control Turner.
It's a fine balance between, people trying to live their lives and us trying to protect the water. It's a balance.
And what is your say within the town of Turner? Because Turner, a part of Turner goes in or is in the Lake Auburn watershed.
Turner is represented by the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission that was formed when this waiver was granted. The Lake Auburn watershed, it encompasses Auburn, Turner, Hebron, Minot, all the way up into Buckfield, actually.
But is there any zoning constraints or ordinances within Turner, Buckfield, the other outlying towns, sort of like there are in Auburn?
We deal with it basically through the representative to the commission. They are in touch with the town. We've had really good cooperation with the towns within the watershed. Actually, it's surprising how good it has been. They've participated in some of the grants that we've had, 319 grants for replacing culverts, doing best management practices. A lot of people have taken advantage of that. in the town of Turner and Minot and Hebron, well, every town. It's amazing. We get a lot of support.
Good. I'm looking forward to looking at this topic more. Thank you very much, Mr. Hazelton. I'm going to open this up to the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business that does not appear on tonight's agenda. I would ask that you state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anybody from the public?
Good evening. My name is Dana Staples. I live in 32 Greenfield Drive. I was inspired to come tonight to talk just from the workshop item that you guys listened to from Auburn Housing Authority. The downtown is really important to me. I think we kind of all agree, or there's at least a consensus, that downtown development in Auburn is something that we want, something that we want to increase. So I put a lot of thought into this, and I've done reading, and I'm trying to figure out how we can do it. Yeah, I know that if you go to other downtowns in the state that are really successful, they pretty much all share one thing, and that's you can't park next to where you're going. So, you know, you're going to park your car and you're going to walk a quarter of a mile to wherever you're going, and that's by design. A successful downtown forces people to walk through it. Walkability is very important. Walkability will increase, you know, your shopping to, you know, places that you might not necessarily be driving downtown to go to. You know, right now, a lot of people will go to Gritty's. They might not be looking to go to Top It Yogurt, but if they walk by it, maybe they will. You know, that type of thing is really important. So I think, you know, when you start the discussion about what you're going to do with their downtown, the parking is very important. And what do we do with parking? Well, if we don't do anything with parking, we get what we had tonight. We get Auburn Housing Authority coming in and saying we need parking, and so we're going to build it. And, you know, maybe they do need the parking. Well, maybe the city should come up with a solution for parking in general, and put some thought behind it so that we can kind of take the bull by the horns and get ahead of the situation. Because as we grow the downtown, every single business owner that comes in is going to have the same concern unless we provide a solution. So I think this is something that, you know, there's a lot of things that need to happen. There's a lot of incremental steps that need to happen to have a good downtown. But I think the parking problem is chief among them. And it's definitely something that we need to put a lot of thought into. So I guess we could go on and on about the different things that we need to do for the downtown, but I think that's a good place to start. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Staples. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak? If not, I'll now close this public session. We're going to move on to unfinished business, which we have none of. So we're going to move on to new business. I'm going to try to get this right. Believe it or not, this hasn't come up. I have one item of new business. It's order number 0201072019. Do I have a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion from Councilor Fournier and a second by Councilor Walker. Open this up for council discussion. Councilor Titus?
Mayor, the reason why I wanted to bring this forward is it is an order that we had to approve, and I've approved it a few times in the past. But I guess I just wanted to have a little bit of an explanation of how this system works. It is I see that it's civilians that are, I guess, you know, serving subpoenas. But I just wanted to get an idea of, first of all, is there a budget for this? I see we have some volunteers and some employee process servers on the list. And when I saw that many, I just wanted to have a little bit of an explanation. Thank you, Chief.
Good evening, Council. The process servers, that's allowed by ordinance for them to be able to serve civil process. And for the subpoenas that we serve, those are on behalf of the District Attorney's Office. Those allow our employees, our volunteers, to go out and serve some of those subpoenas to defendants and or witnesses in some of our criminal cases. The revenue account that you see that's titled court fees, that's the reimbursement that we get from the court for our officer appearances. So that helps offset our court overtime account.
Okay, so these folks, do they ever do civil process, or is it always just for the DA?
It's subpoenas. Sometimes there are subpoenas on behalf of attorneys. You'll see that on that list there are 3 private process servers, and what that does is that allows them to serve subpoenas on behalf of attorneys. They're not serving any civil process, such as eviction notices or evictions or anything like that.
Divorce decrees.
That the county handles. The county charges a substantial fee for that through the county. All we're doing is serving subpoenas.
Now, the county's civil process, they don't do the district attorneys either?
They do. They may for their own department, but as a department, we're responsible for.
I see. Okay, that's one thing I didn't realize. So we're responsible for, if it's something that happened in Auburn, defendant or witness, then we as a city are required to do that service. We can't rely on any other agency to do that for us?
Correct.
Is there a budget for this?
There's
not. No, it's not. So, but there is a cost.
No, there isn't a cost to it.
There's not.
Nope.
So we have we have volunteers, we have employees. That's why I was wondering. We have private people that do this.
Those private people are licensed for themselves
to
go out and act on behalf of attorneys. We don't pay them anything to do that for us.
Oh, okay. So now they must get paid by the district attorney or somebody.
Usually, it's a local defense attorney.
I see. Okay, so we're just providing the people. We're not the conduit for any kind of finances or money passing at all. Correct?
Yep.
Very good. Those are my questions.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council? If not, I'll bring this to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? None. Order passes.
Thank you, Chief.
7-0. Thanks, Chief. Okay, we have an order authorizing the acceptance of Mountain View Drive as a city street. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Fournier and a second from Councilor Walker. I'm going to open this up to the public for comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? None being, I'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Any comments from the council? If you remember, we did have a workshop item on this last meeting.
Yeah, it was a good workshop.
Okay, I'll bring this up to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? None being. Order passes 7-0. Next, we have an order authorizing the discontinuance of Niskayuna Street. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Fournier, second from Councilor Walker. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Is there anybody of the public that would like to speak on this issue? None being, I'm going to bring it back to the council. Is there any debate, discussion, comments?
We had a really good workshop on this.
We might have talked about this one topic more than any other topic individually
I think so.
ever. All those in, any other comment, debate before I rush to a vote? None being? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? None being. The order passes 6-1. Next is resolve reaffirming this adoption of the National Incident Management System, aka NIMS trading, which we've all gone through as a council resolution. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Fournier and a second from Councilor Lasagna.
Nope. Nope.
Councilor Gary. I'll open up to the public for comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this? None being, I'll bring it back to the council for debate. Any debate?
This was another great workshop.
It's a good workshop. I'm going to ask for a vote at this point. All those in favor of adopting the resolution? Opposed? Abstained? None being? Resolution is adopted by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have an order authorizing the sale by sealed bid of 160 and 164 Chacoin Avenue. I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, you have one prior to that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
25 Lake Street,
Did I miss that?
number 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
No, I got it. We have an order authorizing the sale by sealed bid of 25 Lake Street. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Okay, go ahead.
Second?
Second.
Got a motion by Councilor Walker and a second by Councilor Fournier. I'm going to open up to the public for comment. Is there any comment from the public? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Any debate? Okay. I'll ask for a vote at this point, and show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? None being? Passes 7-0. Now we'll get on to Chacoin. We have an order authorizing the sale by sealed bid of 160 and 164 Chacoin Avenue. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to accept.
Motion for Councilor Walker, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Fournier. Open up to the public for comment. Anybody in the public would like to comment on this topic? None being? Bring it back to the council for debate. Any debate? None, no debate. Okay, by a show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? None being? Passes 7-0. We have an order authorizing the sale by sealed bid yet again of 31 Vine Street. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Well, Councilor Young got a second on Councilor Walker's first. Outstanding. We're going to open this up to public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this? None being, bring it back to the council for debate. Any debate? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? None being, passes 7-0. I have an order authorizing the sale of 23 Cleveland Avenue. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, if
Third.
y'all can't count past 2. Okay. I have a motion for Councilor Young, second from Councilor Walker. Any comment from the public? Any members? None being. Okay, we're going to bring it back to the council for debate. Any debate on this topic?
Mayor.
Councilor.
Real quick, I just had a couple of questions. One of them, it relates to the other orders as well as this one. The advertising of this, I would assume, is going to be, obviously, well, they keep saying the newspaper is a legal way, but unfortunately we know that's not the best way. Are there any ideas of how we're going to make sure that the information on these bid opportunities are set out?
Mrs. Jurisco?
The last set that we put out for sealed bid, we put on Facebook, MMA, the Sun Journal, and the city website.
The city's website. I guess really there's not much else we can do in terms of, just let the word out because everybody know that,
I have had some interested parties that have called me and inquired that I could create a distribution list or collect their emails, and when these properties come up, I can make sure to
Well, is it part of the alert me process? I know there is if you want an invitation to bid to do business with us, but is there one of those?
That's a good question. It would be a good way to
Can it be added to the alert me?
I can talk to
People
Liz.
want to add it?
I think that they can sign up to get bids and RFP notices on the city website. So I can talk to Liz to see if that's
Usually you want a separate
option.
list because it's a theory called whiteout. If you get too many emails from a whole slew of different reasons, you just don't pay attention to any of them, which could be a problem just in human psyche. But I think it's a good point. I think there's more. I think we did above and beyond what normally is legally required.
Sure.
I think Mr. Risco and staff did a great
No, I appreciate.
job.
I mean, I wanted. The last thing I wanted to say was I appreciate your efforts on this. So this is something I've been trying to work with and get done, and I'm glad that Peter and you and the staff are getting it done. So we have a process that's continual and ongoing to help get this back on the tax rolls. Right. I think it's going to be a very good thing. So, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any other comments? None. I'm going to bring this back to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? None being? Passes 7-0. We're going to move on to reports. Mayor's reports first. Okay. It's been a few weeks since we've met. A lot has happened in the city. First of all, it's 2019. I had to write it down about 100 times so I could put it to memory. Leading up to 2019, folks, there's a very busy holiday period in Auburn, a lot of activities going on. It kind of hit its crescendo with New Year's Eve Auburn. I'll give you a quick update on that. We had an after-action meeting with city staff on January 3rd. I was there from 8 o'clock in the morning on to the bitter end. So was a lot of staff. Liz Allen, Sabrina Best, Scott Holland, a lot of other people, very numerous to mention. It was a huge success by all measures or definitions. Weather was not so cooperative, but we overcame and adapted to that. Had a wonderful fireworks display that everybody said cost around $30,000, but did not cost even a fraction of that. We just condensed it in a very short amount of time, and it went off great. 3 great bands, around 1,500 people, no out-of-the-ordinary incidences with regards to crime or instances as reported to me by Chief, unless there's an update on that, Chief? Just normal, run-of-the-mill Saturday night? Okay, which was great. That was a huge concern. The vendors loved it. They were all packed. The economic stimulus to our local businesses is really hard to calculate. But from the owner of the Hilton to the owner of Craft Brew Underground to the owners of Gritty's who spent the night at the Hilton and I saw the next day, it was by all, again, it was a success. We'll try to quantify it. We're working on the budget, how much we spent, what it costs from staff time to marketing and so forth for a full future report to the council in addition to the rest of our sesquicentennial activities. Next on the agenda is our birthday on February 22nd. Okay, so we have a...
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes, Councilor.
Lots of people ask me if this is going to be an ongoing activity.
Depends if I get reelected. I don't know. That's a joke. But it's yet to be determined. We talked about it January 3rd. City manager was there. We said, well, I think we all felt, yes, it should be. Yes, it probably will be. But we did decide to, let's take a break and take a breath and fully look at everything before we make that. We do have a luxury of time. But any other comments we get from people and residents and visitors, there are a lot of visitors, would be greatly appreciated. Okay. So going forward, I just want to make one announcement on this. There's obviously a lot of meetings and so forth that we're attending. We will not be having a meeting on January 21st due to the holiday. Our next regularly scheduled council meeting will be on January 28th. During that meeting, I'm going to revise a long kind of shelved or forgotten thing that the mayor used to do in Auburn, going back to the 1869. It's called the State of the City Address. I'll be giving approximately a 9-minute address during communications portion of the meeting. I'll be outlining and talking about 2018, outlining goals that I think we like to achieve and see addressed in 2019. So that's my update. Go on to council update. Start over with Councilor Gary.
No reports tonight. I'll let Council Walker fill you in on the age family.
You guys going to take turns every meeting? Perfect. Councilor Lasagna.
I want to mention that the athletic subcommittee for the new school building, the meeting tomorrow night is canceled. And Thursday night at 6 p.m., Mr. Mayor, is the mayor's ag committee.
Thank you. Yes, Thursday at 5:30 start time.
Thursday at 5:30, which is a public meeting. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Hayes.
I attended the AVCOG meeting back 19th of December with our manager. One item that I was interested in, AVCOG actually does have a Farm Energy Innovation Fund. They've partnered with Slow Money and essentially to implement the fund awarded through the Sewell Foundation, and funding is to assist farms in refining plans for innovation as sustainability energy systems. And AVCOG is looking to develop competitive grant process offering small grants up to $6,000 or 20% of project expense, whichever is more, to organic farms for energy conservation or renewable energy projects on their farms. So I think I haven't any more information on what's said here, but it did sound interesting. There is money there for people, particularly organic farms.
Is that ready right now, or did you say they were putting it together?
No, they've actually, to date, there's a Finkelpod farm has actually completed a community solar system combined with a passive solar greenhouse. So money has been applied.
If you could possibly send that link out, that'd be great to the council and maybe to city register. That way we can put it in the bidding minutes as well. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just real quick, we did have the final sewer district and water district meetings and approved both budgets the last week before Christmas. And now we're looking forward to 2019 and see if we can work out to put another 1.5 miles of new pipe in the ground for the water side. And the sewer district is also working very hard at replacing infrastructure as we have roads being redone. They're trying to work with the city There was one project that I think was going to be done, I think Poland Road was going to be done this year, but now I think the state has put that project off a year. They were going to rebuild Poland Road there, going from Myatt Avenue all the way down to Mimwack. But I've heard that that may be on delay, but that was the next area that we were going to focus on, utilities in the ground. Our next water district and sewer district meetings will be January 15th for the sewer district and January 16th for the water district, 4 o'clock at district office. We also have the marijuana planning ordinance group will be meeting on the 15th. We've had some very good feedback from the public, some emails, and we've had some people come to the meetings and have offered suggestions. We're at the stage now of planning what kind of a fee structure there would be and that kind of thing before we put the ordinance to the planning board for their review, and then come back to us for further review, and then bring it to council. Hopefully, I think by mid to late February, the council will have this to look at. So that's moving right along.
Thank you, Councilor Titus. Councilor Fournier.
Mine would be a little bit longer, so please bear with me, but it's important information which has some impact on future budgets, school committee budgets. First of all, public library, we did not have a meeting. We have a break this winter. The school committee at the last meeting looked at a previous October 17th worksheet that we had worked on. Excuse me for not looking up because I'll forget everything if I don't read it. For space allocation programs. So in other words, at that time, if you do not identify the programs that you need, it's not going to be fit into the structure of the new building. So 13 new satellite programs were approved, which along with it comes a teacher. And the costs need to be in the fiscal year that's prior to the new ELHS. So the costs are not going to be incurred now, but it would be the year before the new ELHS. Those 13 programs, there were 2 positions that were also included. It's a computer teacher and a substance abuse teacher. There were transfers. The initial idea of transferring Franklin Alternative School to the new high school was definitely received a lot of negative concerns, and so the Superintendent Grondin based her decision on all of that and decided to keep it at its present location. The transfer of students of success, which is the SOS program, that will be transferred to the ELHS. We voted to authorize the superintendent and the business manager to enter into contract with Stephen Blatt Architects to plan for 2 classrooms to the Park Avenue Elementary School. Stephen Blatt Architects were the ones who did build that school, and there are 2 spots at the end of Park Avenue. If you go there, it looks like a piece was cut out at the end of the building. That's where the 2 classrooms would go. There were some mention of quite a bit of space needs discussion. That doesn't mean it's happening, but just to put it out there so you'll know what's down the road that would impact the regular budget is Washburn and East Auburn School, who have the same, they use their same space for gym and cafeteria in each of their respective schools. They do not have assemblies. They do not have a specific room for each of them. So that was put out there. Also put out there was Washburn has 2 portables for art and music. I recall East Auburn had a portable for Land Lab for many years, and we seem to get by okay with that. The East Auburn School also does not have art and music classrooms, and their portables are no longer there because they were removed a couple of years ago, so they're making do the best they can. Fairview School has 2 requests. One is that some administrators, I'm not sure how many, share the same office space. I really can't tell you what that means, but that's what was written and discussed. Also at Fairview, they're using a special ed class for general education because of the numbers. I don't know where the special ed students are. I cannot tell you that. The Auburn Middle School has portable for special education programs, so that's where the students go for their special education. At the ELHS right now, Superintendent Grondin said too many to name, but I don't think we have to worry about that because we're going to be building a new school. The other thing that occurred at the last meeting was a really interesting discussion by Special Ed Director Ryan Fairchild. He provided a report finally in terms of special ed, and I've been requesting a long time to have, you know, the special ed students who are going in out-of-district placements come back home because they are very, very costly. And I wanted some statistics for a long, long time, so we did get some, and I feel hopeful that we're going to make a movement toward that. The total population of special ed students here in Auburn is 19% of the population of all of the students. The state average is 17%, so we're not that far off. We have a large population with students identified under emotional disturbance, and that is challenging in terms of instruction in the mainstream, so that's something to consider. Auburn.
What's emotional disturbance?
Emotional disturbance.
What is that?
It's a classification. Students who are out of control and cannot contain themselves.
Bad kids.
Well, they're not bad kids, they're just behavioral.
They're all bad.
Yeah,
I have a couple of them, they're all bad. Okay.
It's bad things that happen to these kids. No, it's called emotional disturbance, it's a classification, and so, you know, we have a concern with that because the classrooms become disrupted and disruptive. So, it would be good, it requires a lot of strategies to be able to, you know, remove them out, bring them back, that kind of thing. So I'm trying to do this all in a nutshell. I know it could last longer, but I only have a few more things. Auburn schools pay for 53, this is the number I've been looking for. Auburn schools pay for 53 students who are out of district for their special ed placement. In all, there are 90 total students who are out of district, but the bulk of the, beyond the 53, those are under Medicaid care, so Medicaid pays for that. The range of special services for students out of placement is between $36,277.28 to $99,008. That's how much it costs for one out-of-district placement student. And the degree of cost depends on the severity of the classification. The goals, there are two goals that Ryan Fairchild has, and one is to create an autism program, and I said, yay, finally. But that's going to take a long time, and that's a big job, but creating an autism program within our school system would encourage other people to be using our system and would have to pay, you know, to come to our programs as well. But it would bring our students back home, and I totally believe this would cost a lot less money. The other goal that Ryan Fairchild has is to become a child development services placement. I used to work as a director of Androscoggin County Child Development Services, and I started the classrooms here and in Lewiston for students before they came to school, preschoolers, put them in the regular school in a classroom together with other 4-year-olds and 3.5 and 4-year-olds. And it's gone like gangbusters all over the state. It really works very, very well. But Child Development Services, once upon a time, had one director for every county. Now they do not do that. They have, you know, consolidated to the point where they're not able to really perform that job well with the consolidation that has taken place. They would like to see all of the CDS programming be held within each of the municipalities. And so what he would like to see is to bring CDS placement to our city. And to me, it makes a lot of sense because we need to deal with the students anyway. If they're our students, we're responsible for them. And these will be for 4-year-olds, not 3-year-olds, but 4-year-olds. And when they turn 5, then they become regular students in the regular school setting. So he gave an example, which is mind-blowing. At the Margaret Murphy home, we have 34 students at the Margaret Murphy, one of the Margaret Murphy homes. If you have four students, for example, the possibility of expenditures for 4 students would be $220,000 for 4 students in the course of a year. And by bringing them here, bringing them home, the cost would whittled down to $28,919. So that is just, I know it's a lot, but it's something to think about as we get into the budget season. And these were, you know, as a wish list type of thing, but I think that we need to really consider carefully where we go with all of this. But I would highly support, you know, bringing our programs back here, because it's just, the cost is in the millions now. And it started out in the hundreds of thousands, but now it's in the millions to educate the special ed students.
Thank you very much.
Question, Council Floyd? They're talking about Park Avenue. They wanted to do this several years ago.
Yes, they did.
Did they come up with any cost estimates?
No, they didn't give us that, no.
Okay.
I have the paperwork here, but all I see is pictures.
Well, if you can, we're going to skip around to Councilor Walker. If you have anything concrete, we can follow back with Councilor Titus's question. Councilor Walker?
Yeah, no cost.
Thank you. I'll keep it short. If I didn't forget what I had to say. It reminds me of Tiz Crowley.
Oh.
No, I had to go over this. You guys need to know this.
No, this is all important.
Doing
Pay
my
no
duty.
attention to the counselor.
My
It's
duty.
all in fun. Tiz Crowley
I
used to
know.
do great
I know.
reports. I guess I want to report to the people there that we're going to have a great meeting tomorrow night at 5:30 at the Senior Center, Pettingill Park, for the age-friendly people that want to come down and talk with us and look over the new bylaws that we need to put together in order to be a perfect committee. So please come on down and give your 2 cents on what we should look like, sound like, and put on paper that if we're going to be an age-friendly community, we got to have the proper bylaws in place. So I can use all your help. Come on down at 5:30. We only got an hour to do this, so we're going to have to work really hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Young.
Yes. Well, thank you. Next week, on the 16th of January, the Committee on Committees, the nomination that we meet, and all the openings are on the website, right? And if they get them in today or tomorrow, or hopefully not right up to the end of it, so our city clerk can have our books ready. We're going to meet next week. Now, all you city councilors here, go to the website and look, because you know that there's some people that are just dying to be on these committees, or hopefully living to be on these committees. And we want to have some work to do, because the last couple of meetings we had very few applications to look over. And Councilor Walker and Councilor Gary serve on that committee with me. And we hope we have a lot of work. So get us a lot of work and nominations to go over, and hopefully people that we have openings, but we'll take any petty at this point. Mr. Councilor Walker, you want anything to add?
One thing, I don't know if I'm adding, but probably making more headaches. The people that go on the website can't fill out forms on the website. Can they now, or will they be able to? Because people are having a problem doing that. It's like they can't, you know.
I don't think it's ready yet, but Liz Allen is in the process of working on that.
But maybe for the 16th it won't be ready. Is that what we're saying?
Right. Actually, today was the deadline for applications, but obviously I'll still accept them between now and the meeting, but...
So we keep telling people to go on the website, but really you can't do anything. They really need to come here and get a form from you.
Or if they can print off the application, fill it out, and submit it.
All right. Print it off, fill it out, then submit it.
Right.
All right.
Okay. We have, the deadline was today. Do we have something to meet about next week?
Yeah, we received, I think, 4 or 5 applications.
Okay, good. Well, we want more than that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the end of my report. I have
Mr.
more to
Manager?
report about the Edward Little Building Committee and all those other types of things, but they won't be meeting this week. I hope, hopefully not.
Very good. Mr. Manager, your report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few items. I think everyone's aware that Captain Matt Fifield has been selected as the Deputy Fire Chief by our Fire Chief, Bob Chase. I see that the Fire Chief is in the audience. Bob, maybe we can have Matt come to a future council meeting when it's convenient for him.
Can we all give him a hand?
We can give him a hand.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilor, for that suggestion. We're all excited about having Matt in that position. I also wanted to mention in terms of the strategic planning process, we had subcommittee meetings last week on growth and quality of life. That process is going well. We had probably 30 to 40 people from the community that were present, as well as city staff, and we broke up into groups, and the discussions were very interesting. We'll be reporting more information on that. I want to thank Phil Kroll, who's not here, and also Liz Allen and the other folks that are involved in helping to do this. This is a team effort by a lot of folks. I appreciate all the work by the staff and people from the community. I also want to mention that the city is taking possession of St. Louis Church. We'll be working with the folks who have been involved with the church in the transition, and we'll be putting a plan together going forward regarding the future of that property. There is on another note, there's a winter parking ban that is on that begins tomorrow at 4 p.m. to 4 p.m. this Wednesday. Regarding the budget process, the FY20 budget process has begun. We have been working with the department heads and our finance director. Jill Eastman is taking the lead on that. They're all working on their capital improvement program requests as well as operating budget requests, and we'll be coming to the council with the workshop to give you an overview on some of the challenges. We don't have all the details at this point. We just want to give you an overview in terms of some of the things that we're facing. There are fixed costs that we have to address, and there are other things that we know we're going to be trying to work into the budget, so we'd like to do that probably before the end of the month, maybe at the next council meeting, if not after that. I also want to mention in terms of parking, there's quite a bit of discussion about parking in the downtown this evening. It was also discussed at the strategic planning meeting the other evening with the different groups that were talking, and the one that Dana mentioned specifically. Parking is something that we are trying to address, and I just want to mention to the council and to the mayor and to the community, we are working on trying to do an arrangement with the developer to lease 13 spaces back to us that he's not going to need for the development that he's doing. Walkability and parking for the downtown is important. That's a goal that the council had established in the budget that was approved by the council. There's funding to address that very problem. $135,000 in TIF funds, tax increment financing funds, $100,000 in bond funds, and $135,000 in CDBG funds. And we're moving forward and working with the developer, Nathan Zanton, to do a lease on those 13 spaces so that we can help address the parking issue. We know we need to have an overall plan. This is not solving all of the issues that we have, but it's a good step forward to try and address that problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. I'm going to open this up to our next open session. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue not appearing on tonight's council agenda. Please state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. And is there anybody from the public who would like to speak? None seeing. I'll now close this open session.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
So just a quick comment.
Oh, please, of course.
Bonnie Lounsbury, on West Auburn Road.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Lonsberry, if you could just sit down, just to the microphone so people can hear you at home.
Bonnie Lounsbury on West Auburn Road. I assume that all you counselors are familiar with the St. Louis church situation, but I just wanted to say that we have 3 extraordinary people in our communities, Noel, Christine, and Donna, who put their hearts and souls, I guess that's really appropriate for a church, into trying to into transforming this church into a different kind of community resource. They've worked really hard for the last 4 years and kept the church from demolition. And I just hope that the council appreciates that, thanks them for their efforts, and if and when that property is transferred, that the city will make sure that there are restrictions so that someone else can try to put their vision into place. Thank you.
Mrs. Lonsberry, thank you. I know I will speak for myself only, and I've worked with the 3 owners, and we put our heads together quite a bit. They are great, and they should be appreciated in the entire community, not just by us, for everything they did. Sometimes solutions work in mysterious ways, I suppose, and hopefully we're on that mysterious way. But at the end of the day, the end result will be what everybody wants it to be. So thank you to those 3 individuals, and as well as everybody else who supported that parish for the years it was around and after. Any other public comment? None being? Okay. We're going to close that open session. We're going to move on to executive session, which there are none. At this point, I'll either entertain a motion for adjournment or anything else.
I move we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor of adjourning tonight at 8:19?
Let's write this down.
8:19, by a show of hands. Opposed? 6-1.
Counselors, before you leave, can you sign this resolution?
Yes.